Olá, boa noite a todas e a todos. Hoje nossa Quarta Verde segundou, mas vocês vão ver que vale muito a pena. A aula aberta de hoje faz parte do curso de pós-graduação em Paisagismo Ecológico da PUC-Rio, um curso que montamos, Cecília e eu, já faz um bom tempinho, estamos o tempo todo atualizando, trazendo novos professores, novos conhecimentos, novas metodologias. Foi um curso que montamos com a partir de 6 departamentos da PUC-Rio e ainda convidamos professores das federais e professores internacionais, né? Então, é transdisciplinar, é transsetoriais por Constituição, né? E a gente convida todo mundo a conhecer, a gente vai passar o link da página para ter mais informação aí durante a nossa apresentação. Gostaria de pedir a todo mundo para se apresentar, aproveitar o chat para se dizer o nome, de onde vem, o que faz, quais são os interesses, se é professor, se é profissional, se é estudante, se é um pouco disso tudo. Podem também elencar as perguntas ao longo, eu vou copiando, colando e no final eu vou passando para a principal as perguntas delas. E está sendo gravado, vai para o nosso canal no YouTube, está demorando um pouquinho para subir no canal no YouTube por algumas questões burocráticas, mas já vai subir. E normalmente ninguém aparece nas câmeras, pode haver se alguém vai abrir o microfone, mas é quase impossível, se alguém tem como desligar a câmera, mas se não, por favor, liguem as câmeras, é muito melhor ver vocês, meus amigos, os colegas, toda a nossa gangue do Complô Verde, né, trabalhando para o mundo mais verde, para cidades mais verde. Muito feliz de ver vocês aqui de volta. Vou me estender um pouquinho mais hoje para dizer que essa figura, Jack, que recebemos hoje, é em parte culpado por essa união minha com a Cecília, né? Essa luta de 12 anos, isso começou lá no Parque Lage, e aí eu te passo a palavra, Cecília, para explicar um pouquinho essa história ali de muitos verões e invernos, e muitas estações de chuva, e muitas estações secas atrás. Por favor, Cecília. Obrigado.
Boa noite, é um prazer enorme estar aqui hoje. A Pierre tem razão, foi o Jack que ele estava no Brasil. Jack, can you hear us?
Yes.
Translation? Yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah.
So I can speak in Portuguese and then I switch to English when I talk to you, okay?
Yeah.
E aí eu estava fazendo mestrado na época lá no ProURB e o Jack estava no Brasil e aí a minha orientadora falou: por que você não promove uma palestra do Jack? E aí eu conheci as pessoas lá do Parque Lage e aí a gente eu promovi, né? Na verdade, a gente era eu, uma palestra do Jack no dia 9 de dezembro de 2008. E a partir desse dia foi o dia que eu conheci o Pierre. Na verdade, foi o dia que eu vi o Pierre sentado na plateia, eu conheci só em janeiro, né? A gente teve o primeiro encontro em janeiro, como a gente teve encontro com as outras pessoas que formaram o Verde, o Instituto Verde, que depois acabou atuando por bastante tempo, promovendo palestras, cursos, etc., que aí daí eu e o Pierre continuamos. E então o Jack foi assim meu professor em 2005, numa pós-graduação que eu fiz uma parte lá na USP, cuja ele estava lá com o Paulo Pellegrino, que já deu uma palestra para a gente há umas semanas atrás, e acabei me conectando muito com o Jack, porque ele dava a disciplina que ele dava lá na USP era Planejamento Ecológico da Paisagem, e eu sabia que era isso que eu queria fazer, e fui para lá, para São Paulo, e aí a gente se aproximou muito, acabei até ficando hóspede dele, lá em Amherst. Ele foi me buscar no aeroporto em Boston em 2009 para um seminário lá em Harvard sobre urbanismo ecológico, e foi assim um momento muito legal, onde eu tive um contato muito mais próximo, não só com o conhecimento que o Jack tinha já na época, mas com a pessoa que ele é, né? Ele e a esposa dele, a Linda, que me acolheram, assim, me levaram para todos os lugares, foi maravilhoso. E, enfim, e aí eu estou assim, hoje bastante emocionada de ter o Jack com a gente, porque eu acho que ele é um marco na minha vida e na vida, acho que, da minha relação com o Pierre também, né? Então, agora eu vou passar um pouquinho para inglês. Jack, I'm so happy that you're here because you are kind of one of my mentors, my important person in my professional life, and a person who I am now. I think you have a great influence. I think it's very good for me to say that. It was really nice when I was with you in Boston, and then we went to urban, actually was, the name was Ecological Urbanism, the seminar that was in Harvard. Oh, yeah. And I remember when we were having lunch, I think, with people talking about Masdar, and I said, this is absolutely insane. And you said, no, this is a good experiment. Yeah. We will learn about that. And I know it's insane now. So many years after that, it should have been done already for 10 years, I think. And nobody's living there. And exactly what when I heard that, I said, this is not going to happen. I remember there was somebody from Hong Kong or so. Then I was really mad with what they're doing. And I said, they're wasting money. They're putting a square in the desert. And I think everybody should learn about Masdar, because they saw it as the ecological city in this seminar in Harvard. And I was very critical about that. And watching behind now with my, I know I was right when I was criticizing, and Jack was trying to be more political and said, oh no, we can learn a lot of technologies about that. I said, I don't think so. Do you remember this day?
I do, yeah. Now that you mentioned it, I do, yeah.
Lunchtime, and we were discussing a big table, lots of people, and I was really new in the area. I was not somebody that was really had a lot of experience. I was just feeling that this couldn't work, and it doesn't work.
Like a sponge, actually. Like you were soaking up the knowledge like a sponge.
Yeah, it was really great. I think Jack has a very deep meaning for me. So good. I'm very happy to have you here. He's a professor in at University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and I think you can talk more about yourself a little bit, and then go to your presentation, because I think you're really somebody that everybody should hear with a lot of attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank everybody that is here again. I forgot about our audience in Portuguese. We have Norca, that is from Peru, I think, right, Norca? And I think we have more people from abroad, and I'm very happy. Thank you very much for the presence of all of you. Jack, it's with you now.
Now, I would like to share my screen. It's maybe somebody needs to allow that. Oh, there we go. Very good. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Cecilia, for the very kind introduction. I'm sorry I need to speak in English. My Portuguese is very limited. I can say boa noite, obrigado, de nada, and a little more, but that's not enough for a talk. Excuse me. So it's really a pleasure to share these thoughts with you today. A lot of my career, I have focused on water. Early on, when I was in graduate school, a long time ago, it was a different century, of course. And I studied with Ian McHarg. And at that time, in the late 70s, at my university, we were already promoting these ideas. We knew that they were the right ideas, and we were experimenting with them and exploring these ideas. And of course, the field has advanced tremendously across the world since then, because it's a good idea and it works. You know, so This is not a fringe theory. This is a very sensible approach to urbanization. And if you think about it, in the last 40 years, urbanization across the world has advanced like never before in history. And it will continue for at least the next 50 years, most people expect. So these challenges will only become greater in the future. With that, yeah, I think Cecilia gave me enough of an introduction. Just my connection with Brazil. I have a good friend and colleague, Professor Paulo Pellegrino at University of Sao Paulo. I have given lectures at his university at his invitation. He has been to my university, and we have published a few articles together, including one that's in review and preparation right now. So thanks again for the invitation. It's really a pleasure. Okay. So this is a quote from my chapter with Pellegrino. Water is therefore the appropriate basis for the spatial and functional organization of a new type of green urban infrastructure. So green infrastructure has many purposes and functions. In our chapter and in my talk today, we argue that green infrastructure is first about water, and the other benefits come along with that as well. And hopefully I will convince you of that and make a strong case for that idea. Here are 5 of the big ideas that we use in our chapter called Green Infrastructure Guided by Water. First, water is the universal solvent and is essential for all life. That's a profound statement, and it's very important. And if you study chemistry or physics, you know this. You know, almost everything that water touches, it will dissolve and it will transport. That's the universal solvent. So as water moves across landscapes, it picks up and transports all kinds of things. In cities, many of those things are pollutants, nutrients, contaminants, toxic materials. But on the other hand, water is essential for all life. So there's no avoiding that. So we can't live without water. Hydrology is the principal function and guiding process for green infrastructure. Green infrastructure can do more than hydrology. It can mitigate climate. It can moderate flooding. It can cycle nutrients. It can provide habitat for wildlife. It can provide place for human recreation. But I believe hydrology is the principal function. But it provides these multiple ecosystem services, as I just mentioned. It's also a great indicator of natural process. Water is, you know, it's a little bit like going to the doctor and pee in the cup, right? When you go to the doctor, they say, here's a cup, pee in the cup. Why do they do that? Because the urine that comes from our body will tell a lot about the health of our body. The same way that water in the city tells us about the health of the city environment. And finally, water is a transboundary element because it moves across the landscape. It doesn't pay attention to political boundaries, economic boundaries. It moves by gravity, and that's what makes it move, right? So it integrates environmental and social and cultural values and processes. So, well, I will argue that water is the integrating resource. I mentioned some of these points before. It's also the symbol of life in most cultures and religions and art. And the human impact on water has been extensive, especially in cities. The photograph is a famous photograph from the United States of a river in Cleveland, Ohio, that caught on fire. The river was so polluted with oil floating on the river that the river caught on fire. And when this happened, and this photograph was distributed, it was one of the turning points in the environmental policy of the United States. People said, oh, we have to do something about this now. So it was the beginning of the Clean Water Act, which was a major advance in how we deal with water. Up until then, water was basically a good place to get rid of stuff. Sewerage, nutrients, industrial discharge, just throw it in the water and forget about it. So that has changed. Most of you will remember some kind of a version of this diagram, the hydrological cycle, that shows the water evaporates from the ocean. Of course, it evaporates from everywhere, not only the ocean. It goes into clouds. The clouds make precipitation, and the precipitation flows across and into the ground and back to the ocean. It's a very simplified diagram of the water cycle. And I think everyone is familiar with that one. Here's a different diagram of the water cycle, the urban water cycle. I'm not going to go through all of the details, but hopefully you can see, it starts with the first difference. We import water from other places, and we discharge the water. We use it in different ways. We treat the water. We separate different types of water from wastewater and stormwater, and the water ultimately discharges into groundwater and surface water. But in between, there's a whole series of different dynamics that happen with the urban water cycle. This is I believe, a nice diagram written by a colleague of mine, Vladimir Novotny. I wrote a book with him about 10 years ago on water sensitive design for sustainable cities. And in the book, he argues that over history, there have been 5 different paradigms of water management in Western culture, starting with ancient Romans, industrial. He points to the US Clean Water Act that I mentioned briefly. After that fire in Cleveland, the United States made a big commitment to clean up the water with industrial treatment. But now we're in the era of sustainable water management. We no longer get our water from local wells in cities. We no longer put our wastewater into the streets. We're starting to move to separated sewers. We're starting to manage stormwater in a different way. And we're looking for multifunctional and nature-based solutions in this 5th paradigm. So you could say that everything I'm proposing and showing you this evening is part of this 5th paradigm of urban water management. And here's a nice simple image to illustrate that from Portland, Oregon. It's a very progressive, environmentally sensitive city in the Pacific Northwest of the US. So here's a parking lot, right? It's a necessary evil of our society, but this parking lot has a lot of elements of green infrastructure built into it, including place for bicycles, so people don't have to drive. But where they drive, the pavement is permeable. So when the rain falls, it can go directly into the ground. The parking lot also has a lot of trees, you can see. The trees will catch some of the water before it even hits the ground, so it reduces the effect of flooding and urban storms. And the trees also provide shade that mitigates the urban climate, which is another benefit of green infrastructure. So these three diagrams are, I'm sure many of you have seen different versions of these diagrams. These diagrams illustrate the difference between a forest condition on the left that has 0% impervious surface. We get 50% infiltration, 40% evapotranspiration, and 10% runoff. This is what happens anywhere in the world where you have 0% impervious conditions. If we go all the way to the right, when we have 50 to 75% impervious, a lot of cities will fit into that range. Some cities have more impervious than that, but it's a good average. When we get to this level, we end up with 55% runoff. We go from 10% to 55, a huge increase in runoff. This is why we get urban flooding. We have a great decrease in evapotranspiration from 40 to 30%, and we have a big decrease in infiltration. So we only 15% infiltration versus 50. So as we go to urban conditions, these are the main ways that we start to affect the urban water cycle. More runoff, less evapotranspiration, and less infiltration. This combined sewer problem is a terrible problem that occurs in most cities in the world. Few people understand it, so if you know it, I'm sorry, I hope I don't bore too many people, but it's important to understand. On the left, we have a connected system, the combined sewer on the top, I'm sorry. So on a sunny day here, when the sewerage from the building goes into the pipe and it goes to the treatment plant. It doesn't go out to the river. So when it's not raining hard, in dry weather, no problem. The drainage system brings the sewerage to the treatment plant. The problem is when it rains, when you have a combined system. Then you get all of the runoff from the street going into the same drain. That's the combined system. And then there's too much effluent and water to go to the treatment plant. So it has to be discharged somewhere. And that is usually into a river or the ocean for a city that's on the coast. This is why, you know, in Rio, it's not a good idea to go swimming after a big storm, right? Because the sewerage comes from the city and goes right into the ocean. And I'm not picking on Rio. It happens in most cities in the US and many cities around the world. On the bottom is the solution or the alternative. This is a separated system. On a sunny day, the same thing. The sewerage goes directly to the wastewater treatment plant. But when we have a wet day, a stormy day, the sewerage goes to the treatment plant and the other runoff goes to a different drainage system and goes to the river without the sewerage. Much better solution. It's a simple solution to the problem, but to change the city drainage system is a monumental cost because every building has to be changed and retrofit to connect to a different sewer system. Every street has to be excavated with a new system. So, so this combined sewer problem is the main impetus for urban green infrastructure around the world. It's because the engineering solution is conceptually simple, but very expensive and very complex to implement. So that's where green infrastructure comes in. It reduces the amount of runoff in wet weather to reduce or eliminate the combined sewer problem. Climate change. Climate change will surely be a big function of green infrastructure in the future, as these authors note. Many of the effects of climate change are water related. We have more frequent and more intense precipitation that causes flooding and also causes more droughts, more period of not enough rain. Green infrastructure reduces the drought effect because it gets the water back into the ground, infiltration. So when it's not raining, plants can take water from the groundwater, and the groundwater feeds the streams to make the streams function in a more healthy way. Green infrastructure intercepts, stores, and slows down the runoff, producing less flooding. And green infrastructure can increase urban tree canopy and mitigate extreme heat. Another big benefit of green infrastructure. Here are some examples of precipitation change in North America as a function of climate change. With the change here, you can see the percentage up to 30% in a lot of the northeastern United States, 10 to 20% in the Midwest, and some bad areas in the West as well. So it's a serious problem. A graph from South America or Brazil would certainly look very similar to this. But I don't want to give everyone a headache and feel hopeless about this. There are very basic, simple strategies that are well known to planners and designers, and including engineers. The engineers used to be the guys that put in combined sewer systems, right? That's who made that. And they thought, oh, this is good. We can get rid of everything at the same time. But the engineers have changed, and they're very much supporting these ideas. So there are 4 strategies, we could say, that is the toolbox that we can use to promote urban water management in a sustainable, resilient way. First is to increase interception. Interception is catching the rain before it even gets to the ground. Before it touches the ground, when we plant trees in the city, the trees, every leaf on the tree can hold water. And if a tree has 50,000 leaves, that's a fair amount of water that will just sit on the leaves and never get on the ground. So it's like the tree is like a giant sponge that can reduce the water hitting the ground. The same thing with green roofs. The green roofs catch the precipitation and slowly release it down to the drainage system. But in the meantime, they intercept that. Storage is a simple idea and very, very central to green infrastructure. We can store the water in rain barrels, in cisterns, and rain gardens. I'll show some examples of that. Ubiquitous infiltration. Ubiquitous means everywhere. We can use permeable pavement. We can use bioswales. when we have cities with a lot of impervious surface, we have to find places where we can get the water back into the ground. That's the key, infiltration, getting the stormwater back into the ground. And you know, a newer name for some of these ideas is nature-based solutions. This is creating new wetlands and making new types of green infrastructure in the city. And of course, we want to design green infrastructure so it does more than one thing. You know, I'm proposing and arguing that green infrastructure is important for hydrology first, but it's also important for many other ecosystem services. And I hope you're familiar with that concept because it's useful around the world to talk about what the humans get from nature. Here's an example of interception. These are green roofs. This is actually a research site in Malmö, Sweden, where they do research on green infrastructure to see, for example, what kind of plants are best to capture rainfall. And do these green roofs improve the water quality? Doing important research like this. Here's an example of ubiquitous infiltration. So somebody here just broke the concrete in Copenhagen and exposed the soil underneath and put plants in it. I think it's a kind of a beautiful example because it's so unusual, and it calls people's attention to this idea of where is the runoff going, like a big scar on the pavement. A more familiar type of infiltration, grasscrete, is a type of porous paving that you can see. This is a kind of a matrix system of concrete that has soil in between the cells, and grass can be grown there. And this doesn't work so well for vehicle traffic, but for bicycle traffic, it works very well. And you can see the grass is growing very well here, and the rainfall can go into the ground. Here is the idea of a floodable park for storage. So when it's not raining, there's a constant water level, but this park is designed so that when a lot of rain comes, this park will fill in. Maybe 1 more meter of water can fill in this, and then it will infiltrate for a number of days after the rainfall. Here's another example. This one is from China. This one is from the Netherlands. So this is a sports park. You can see the basketball goal and a soccer goal. So when it's dry, people can play sports, but this is a way to create the space to store a large amount of stormwater. Instead of sending it into the river or into the combined sewers, it stays here and is released slowly after the rain. And of course, multifunctionality is the goal of every green infrastructure project. This is a river in Portugal, an urban river in the city of Porto. You can see the river has been put into a channel, but that channel has a floodplain so that the water can spill over. The floodplain has native vegetation. It also has a bicycle trail and a trolley track following the river. So all of these functions are provided in the same corridor. Oh, I did that one already. This is some research on a nature-based solution by Professor Pellegrino from USP. And this was, he took the runoff from the street that you see at the top and brought that runoff through 2 parallel systems. One of them on the left has turf grass, and the other one has a number of different species of plants. And then this water was collected to measure the effect of the plants on the volume of the water and also on the quality of the water. And the research found that the example on the right with a lot of plants removes more of the pollutants and nutrients from the water than just a simple turf grass on the right. So this is the role of research. This is one example of a safe to fail experiment that I will explain more about that as we go through the talk. But so this was a piece of research to say, oh, you know, we don't know if a diversity of plants will make a difference in the water quality or not. So let's try it. And what happens if it doesn't work? No big deal, right? We're probably going to clean the water a little bit anyway. So it has a low risk, and if it doesn't work, it's safe to fail. Here's a more substantial experimental project in China with these terraces that use this is integrating the cultural traditions of China for rice terraces. Rice is a staple food in China. Rice is often grown on hillsides that are a whole hydrology system where the water starts at the top and moves down by gravity to the lower terraces. So here's a beautiful solution in an urban park that takes the idea of rice terraces and applies that for stormwater management. A very beautiful solution by Touriscape in China. So some guidelines for designing innovative urban hydrology. First is, please do better than simple plumbing. Plumbing is making a big hole in the ground and filling it up with water and then pumping it out after the storm. That's the plumbing approach, only looking at volume of water. The idea is to add beauty and meaning. I believe many of you in the audience are landscape architects. This is what we do. When we design things, of course, they have to work. The plumbing piece, that's absolutely has to work, but we can do more than that. We can add beauty and meaning. We can enhance biodiversity. We can reduce cost. It can be a place for environmental education, and we can prepare for climate change. So all of these things can layer on top of each other and give the project a much greater benefit, multiple solutions and benefits. So this is what we don't want to do. This is the bad example. This is in Tokyo. This is a gigantic underground cistern to fill up with stormwater. You can see the people here for scale to show you how big this is. It's like a giant cathedral that fills up with water when they have heavy rain in Tokyo. They have no place to put it, so they dug a big hole and put it there. And then after the rain stops, then all of this water has to be pumped out slowly into the drainage system. It uses tremendous energy. Excuse me. Yes, it reduces flooding, but it doesn't provide any other benefits, and it has other liabilities. So this is like a purely plumbing solution. We have to do better than this. I think these people on the tour are enjoying it, but most people in the city never even know that this is there. So here's one of my favorite examples of stormwater design guidelines from the city of San Francisco in the US. And it's a beautifully illustrated, very simple set of guidelines to explain and communicate these ideas. Starting with the difference from, on the top, the pre-development condition. The hills were covered with grass and trees. You can see the little cup here, a very small amount of runoff. The city gets built on the steep hillsides. Now we have a lot of runoff coming off the city. This is the problem in almost every city in the world. Here's the solution. This is the idea of employing a large number of tools. The toolbox has many tools in it, and they're all labeled here. Bioretention planters, detention basins, green roofs, street trees, constructed wetlands. We need all of these techniques, including cisterns. You see this cistern here is like that example I showed you from Tokyo. This is a smaller example. Sometimes you have to do that because there's no space for these other solutions. But green roofs can go on, certainly any new building can be built and designed with a green roof. Older buildings, more complicated. Here's a detail of that. So now when the rain falls on the city, you can see all of these green elements that are intercepting, infiltrating, storing, and treating this water before it goes back into the groundwater. So this is the urban solution, urban green infrastructure for stormwater management in San Francisco. All of these tools need to be used when you get into very urban conditions. So we have to figure this out. We need to try new techniques because, first of all, the problem is changing as we speak, right? The climate is constantly changing. I discussed how the climate change is having big effects on precipitation and flooding. We all know these. And however, as professionals, we often go back to the tried and tested solutions that worked in the past, the conventional solution. Most of our cultures have a bias against innovation, because if you innovate, you take some risk, right? If you try something new, maybe it's never been done before, or maybe it's never been done in your city. Maybe it's an idea from China or from Europe or from the US. So these ideas have to be adapted. And this is the idea of designed experiments, where we can explore innovative ideas, but using a robust research design, so that when we finish, we can monitor the project, we can learn if it works with real data, and then we have new knowledge to apply to future projects. And this can be done, I will argue, this can be done with any project, right? Every road that's built should be experimenting with innovative and alternative ways to provide drainage. And if we could build 1% of all of the roads with experiments built into them, imagine how many experiments we would have. You know, there in your city today, I will gamble, I will bet there are roads being built, right? This is something that happens literally every day, every year. It's an ongoing process. So if we can tap into the process of urban development to help us develop new knowledge, now we're starting to get a partnership to build some new solutions that are proven and that will work. And we have to do this in a safe to fail way. This is a simple diagram one of my students made to show the idea of what is the effect of rain gardens on water quality, right? It's relatively easy to measure water quantity. We can calculate or measure how much water comes in, how much water goes out, but it's a little harder to say, well, did that rain garden clean the water? Did it remove sediment? Did it remove nutrients or pollutants? So this is a very simple idea to put in pipes underneath the rain garden in a way that you can collect water samples from different depths underneath the rain garden. This first pipe is shallow underneath the rain garden, and then we can go deeper to see the effect of the soil to remove nutrients and contamination from the water in the rain garden. Very simple idea. When rain gardens started to be built, you know, as a professor, I would do research on this and ask the design firms, like, oh, that's you made the rain garden to improve the water quality. Did it work? And the answer that I always got was, we don't know. We didn't have any money to monitor it. The client didn't want to do it. So we have to change the culture so that when we do these innovative projects, we are willing to stand behind them and to do some real measurement of the benefits so that we will know if they work or not. And this is changing very quickly in our profession. I'm very happy to say. I don't have it on the PowerPoint, but there's a very nice resource you might want to take note of. It's from the Landscape Architecture Foundation, LAF. It's an American group, and they have been giving research funding to professors and professionals to document the performance of green building projects, including green infrastructure. And the results are all online. It's freely accessible. The LAF Performance Series is a tremendous resource, and it's showing the benefits of doing this type of monitoring and designed experiments. Here's another example. This is the idea to look at biodiversity. When green roofs are built, people will often say, oh, these green roofs will provide habitat for insects and pollinators. Well, usually they don't know if they really work. So these are some simple techniques that are very familiar to scientists. And these techniques can be used to collect insects on the green roof so that you know if the pollinators are indeed living there. So I would say, I would recommend make a habit of using a safe to fail design strategy. First point, context. Wherever you are in the world, there are limits on place-specific knowledge. As I said earlier, what works in Paris or Beijing might not work in Sao Paulo, right? Every city is different, has a different climate, a different soil, a different urban structure. Everything is different. So every place needs place-specific knowledge. We can start with the principles from other places, but they have to be adapted to other locations. The goal of the Safe to Fail is to promote innovation to deliver urban ecosystem services. We want to improve stormwater management. We want to mitigate climate change. We want to provide habitat for wildlife and pollinators. We want to provide places for people to enjoy urban nature, etc. So the idea is to be innovative so that we can do a better job. We have no choice, right? We can't be satisfied with what's been done before. Oh, that's good enough. That works. Like, I'm sorry, that's not enough. We have to constantly try to improve and to do better. So this is the idea of pilot projects. Take a small project, try it out, do it in a rigorous way so that you can learn from it. Communicate the risks and benefits beforehand. You tell your client, you tell the people in the neighborhood, you tell the politicians, we're trying something new, it might not work. But if we don't push the boundaries of our knowledge, we can't make innovations. And then they'll say, well, what if it fails? And we say, well, it's not a problem because we're doing a small pilot project, a sample, a demonstration. If it fails, we know the risks, we accept the risks. Now we've even learned something, even in a failure. Hopefully we don't fail and we get new knowledge that we can use. Opportunistic implementation, in short, where do you do this? And I say everywhere, all the time, right? All the time. This should be built into the way you work. Make a habit. Oh, when you're doing a project, you could say, oh, what kind of experiments can we build into this project under this concept of safe to fail? I have an article that explains safe to fail a bit more. It's a short article. It's only 5 pages long. I know that it's important because this article has received more citations than any other article I've written. So if you just Google safe to fail with my name, you'll find it. And it's a quick read if you're interested in learning more about that. Here's an example from Sao Paulo by Professor Pellegrino for a very urban neighborhood in the Jaguare watershed, illustrating how the green infrastructure can fit into a typical urban street cross section. There's a lot of infrastructure in the ground, but if you can add this layer that can infiltrate groundwater, slow it down, trees to intercept, this reduces the flooding. When we zoom out in the same project, we can see the how this infrastructure becomes a kind of a neighborhood or regional park that provides opportunities for recreation, studying nature, and other ecosystem services. And here's another example of how the creek can be re-engineered so that in addition to providing the drainage functions, it can provide other functions, including recreation, nature study, wildlife habitat, and so forth. This is a classic example in the US. 20 years ago today, this was one of the first projects that was built in this whole concept. It's called the C Street Edge Alternative in Seattle, Washington. This was developed under the idea to think like a salmon. Seattle has salmon fish, and the fish need clean water. And this was the beginning of a strategy to try to think like a salmon. This is what the C Street looked like before the project. A typical, it's really suburban, not really urban, a typical suburban street neighborhood, lots of pavement, lots of impervious surface. And this is what they changed it to. A smaller street, it has permeable paving, it has swales, it has native plants, and it transformed this neighborhood. And the reason this project became so successful is because it was monitored. They did the safe to fail experiment. The University of Washington measured the runoff, and they found that this system removed 95% of the annual runoff, 95%. They used native plants, and then they discovered some benefits they didn't even expect. One was the traffic calming. It slows people down. People drive slower, or they don't even go through there. The other are social benefits because they involved the neighborhood to build this project and to maintain it. So the people who live here come out and work on this project, and they have a better sense of neighborhood identity and another benefit that comes along with it. I have to move a little quicker. I'm talking too much. This is another great example of urban green infrastructure in New York City, in a part of New York City called Staten Island. And this project was the last area of New York City that didn't have sanitary sewers. They tried a radical alternative idea. And they adapted existing wetlands for water quality improvement. They saved $50 million, $50 million. And they provided additional benefits, including wildlife habitat, recreation, etc. This is how it works. On the top of the diagram, you can see the neighborhood that has a conventional drainage system. But instead of the drainage system just going into a bigger pipe, the drainage system goes into this nature-based solution with a forebay, a channel, a micro pool, and then it goes out into the discharge. So it's a constructed wetland system to handle the stormwater from each neighborhood. This is what part of it looks like. It has a structure to control the discharge of water, and it has it's filled up with plants, as you can see. A summary of this project, another example of safe to fail. It started as a pilot project. Primary function is stormwater management, but it has the other benefits: water quality, habitat, recreation. It saved $50 million. And now this project has been adapted for other New York City projects to deal with stormwater management. It's a great, great success story. Going to Sweden, Sweden was planning to have the Olympics some years ago. They didn't get the call. Maybe it went to Rio. I don't know if it was that competition, but they had already started to build this new housing project that was going to be used for the Olympics, but they just used it for people in the city. And the whole project has a very strong water management theme. And they've taken all of these tools I've mentioned and used them in a beautiful way in the urban design. So all of the neighborhood green spaces have a stormwater function, like this wetland that is like a giant sponge in the middle of the neighborhood, down to the details where the stormwater comes off the roof and goes into these little swales along the walkways, a little wetland that's created behind the houses to clean and store the water. And the water system itself becomes an urban design focus for the project. This is the canal that collects that stormwater, and eventually it goes out to the ocean. This is a great project in Berlin, in Potsdamer Platz. This was the center of Berlin before the war. Potsdamer Platz was like the heart of the city. And then after the war, the Berlin Wall was built right through here. So for 50 years, this was a no man's land. Nobody even could walk here. So after the wall came down, Berlin said, oh, we're going to redevelop Potsdamer Platz. And they did it in a very green way by this firm, Dreiseidel, a German firm. This is a totally created wetland. You can see this ramp here. This wetland is built on top of a parking garage. You know, talk about an urban application. So they didn't find a wetland in the city. They made the wetland completely artificially. Here's a diagram of how it works. It collects the water from the buildings, from the roofs and the pavement. It brings it to cisterns. The cisterns also feed this created wetland. And then the water is brought back into the building to be used for secondary uses, not for drinking water, but for toilet flushing and secondary uses. It looks like this, a very urban application, but putting this stormwater management very much in the foreground where people can see it and experience it every day. It's part of the identity of the project. These corporations, like this building is a European headquarters for Sony Corporation. They want to be seen as a green company. So this This wasn't an extreme, unusual example. This was a mainstream project in the middle of the city, and it has worked very well. So I'm starting to finish up here. Just to finish up on the safe to fail, a strategic approach to build urban resilience capacity. It doesn't work only for stormwater. It can work for any ecosystem service. It's an emerging theory and strategy that unfortunately is still not well understood or applied, but it kind of takes the process of urbanization and turns it into an opportunity to generate experiments without finding new money for them. That's another key, right? Projects, roads are going to be built anyway. You put 1% of the project into an experiment and the budget is already solved. This is an opportunity for design and planning professionals because we have experience and knowledge about design and construction in the built environment. We can understand the problems, we can think creatively and find the solutions. But we need transdisciplinary collaboration. You can't do this alone. We need to work with engineers, we need to work with scientists, we need to work with community groups, we need to work with politicians. Everybody needs to be in the big tent that can talk about this project and critique it and make suggestions from different viewpoints. If, for example, if the community isn't involved, how can the solution be sustainable if the people don't understand what it is? The designers will be gone, the project is built. You know, if people don't understand why they did it, they won't value it and it won't survive. So I will finish up with this slide on some opportunities and needs for research. First is monitor and document the performance of ecosystem services consistently, always. So think about opportunities in any project you do to measure after they were built. And this includes social benefits. You know, we talk about, maybe we make an argument that green infrastructure provides, it provides places for people to have recreation and social engagement in neighborhoods. Nice idea. Maybe it works. How can you measure that? You go there and you measure, you interview people, you make observations about how many people are there and what are they doing. So any ecosystem service can be measured in this way, whether it's quantity of water that runs off, how many butterflies are supported, what is the temperature difference. There are always opportunities to do research in these projects. And if there's no money to do it, you can try to find some volunteers. You know, how about the local school system? You know, make a suggestion. They can collect water quality samples and analyze them in their science class, for example. So kind of thinking like this is a way to make the cities more sustainable. We really need to keep track of the costs, because if green infrastructure is not cost effective, it is doomed to failure. We can't say, oh, the green infrastructure is important, it costs a bit more, but it's worth it. That's a bad argument to start from. Much better to say, the green infrastructure is a good idea, it works, and it will save you money. This is why green infrastructure has been so successful and popular, because it can save money. So we have that beautiful argument in our pocket that we can use more, but we need to keep track of the costs in order to do that. And finally, to integrate safe to fail experiments into routine landscape architecture professional practice, right? If you think about that and ask yourself with every project, what kind of experiments could we build into this? What's unique about this project? what is the community interested in, and try to build these experiments into the projects so that we can start to have this culture of innovation. And again, I'm sorry I didn't put it on the PowerPoint, but look, if you're interested in this, look up the Landscape Architecture Foundation Performance Series, LAF Performance Series. Okay, now I'm finished. And while we're going to get some questions, I hope. I'm happy. I have to run and grab my my electricity because I'm almost out of power. I forgot to collect that, so I'll be back. Un momento.
Okay, Jake, thanks a lot.
Wow, that was a great presentation. Foi uma aula ótima, né? Acho que, assim, Jack levantou, assim, muitos pontos importantes, e eu acho que agora que ele está colocando energia de volta, a gente vai poder colocar as perguntas que foram dadas, né? Eu acho que... Thanks, Jack. I think you have... we can't hear you.
Oh, yeah, well.
Okay, no, yes. We're not
You're very
talking.
welcome. And I mean, thank you. I enjoy sharing these ideas with students and professionals. And I hope I've given you something to think about.
Yeah, I think you gave us a lot of things. Well, at least for me, you instigated myself. I think about, I don't know how many years ago, but a lot. And I thank you so much for bringing this and this. I think that this concept of safe to fail is really fundamental, and it's very. We hear a lot of different visions of green infrastructure and nature-based solutions, and so many other presentations we had, so many classes. But nobody talks about safe to fail. And I think you bring this, and this is really something that is very, very important for everybody here, that really incorporate this concept in everything they do. Because I think we are all from different areas. I know, because we ask everybody to put their backgrounds, or what they do, where they work, and where they are from. But they can take this concept and everything that you brought to us to their places. So use this in their context. I think Pierre must have had a list of comments and questions.
Yes, we have a list of questions, and also I want to thank you a lot, Jack, once again. 12 years later, our after our first meeting, it's
13.
wonderful. 13. The time is running, and to see that the concept keeps strong, and we know there are not anymore like small piece in a urban landscape, like hard gray concrete scape. Now today we have every day more and more opportunity to see green infrastructure applied to cities all over the world. Actually, here in São Paulo, there is a lot of opportunities done by the municipality, but we have also a lot of people here doing their own experiments. And we have here Raquel from Niterói, who have done a wonderful job to transform the park around a lagoon based on your studying your books and your publication. She make a beautiful acknowledgement in the chat. Take a look. And it's really nice to see that, okay, we are still there, we are still fighting, and we are making some changes in the cities. I can see many people here who have made some change. Maybe even if it's 1 square meter, we have changed something, and that's really nice to see that the theory is there to make some real change in the real world. It's really nice. So thanks a lot, Jack.
It's my pleasure, Pierre-Andre. And this is what teachers, this is the best compliment for the teacher, is when the students or the audience say that that was very helpful and we are using your ideas. So and I keep in touch with Cecilia, and I know she's been pushing what is your group? Verde.
In Verde.
In Verde.
Verde. Right, of course. Sorry. Yeah, you know, that was, I think that was born from these early discussions, and yeah, great leadership by Cecilia, and sharing this with the community and with the students is really terrific. So good to see.
Yes, you push us to make a presentation for the IFLA like a lot of years ago, and it was it's a really nice, and we make a proposal to see how we can look like to transform the city, and it's until today it's still pertinent, and it's still something that we really want to see. So let's go to the questions. We have a question from Loana. Which is like quite a concrete question. It's like, what kind of softwares do you use for measures the requalification of infrastructure in districts? And
good question. I'll be honest. I don't have a good answer for that question. This is why I have, not to be glib, but this is why I work with engineers. So when I do projects where I need real information about water quality, I make sure that I work with water scientists and engineers, and they do the software part. I'm a kind of a conceptual guy and a designer, and I'm sorry I can't give the answer for that. I would one resource that the person who asked the question could look at is the Center for Watershed Protection, CWP, which is an American nonprofit group that does a lot of work in this area. And I will guess on their website they have good information, including software.
Great, and that's why we're transdisciplinary. That's because we need someone to understand about the water, someone to understand about the soil, someone to understand about construction, someone to understand about existing infrastructure, and someone to make like the connection between the different elements. So software are tools, but what's more is more like behind that is like we need a lot of disciplines together to work and to understand how it works. And then we learn every day. That's wonderful in our profession, that we are learning every day with different people, and about how soils works, plants works, peoples, and traffic, a lot of things. And let's go to other question. What do you think about algae or microalgae? I don't know if my French pronunciation is ending with words. Applied in water ecosystem service as a strategy. How algae can transform light and carbon in oxygen. Can we create some wetlands, more performant wetlands using algae in the ecosystem?
Yeah,
question from Natalia.
That's a biologically based treatment. A lot of species of algae are they're tolerant of high levels of nutrients, and they're also very efficient to transform those nutrients into organic molecules, to remove them from the water. and then the algae can be harvested and composted and returned to organic material to the soil. So yeah, algae cultivation and harvesting is a very, it's becoming a common strategy for cleaning the stormwater. It's not used everywhere because especially in very public urban environments, when the water is filled with algae, it doesn't look so pleasant. So, when it's not directly in the public view, then it more likely can be used. But it can work even in very extreme environmental conditions, and often in a kind of a series with starting with one basin. When polluted water comes in, the first basin is the most polluted. So the species of algae and plants that can not only can remove a lot of nutrients, but they can survive in this polluted environment. And then the water goes to the next basin where it's a little cleaner, and you have different species of plants and algae and so forth through a series of up to 6 or 8 different basins to clean the water from the inlet to the outflow.
Great. And I'm going to make a question. And here in Brazil, sometimes we have like huge rains, like this 300 millimeters in 3 hours. I think something like completely crazy. And do green infrastructure have response for this kind of rain? And I'm going to complete my question, because we have flooding areas, and we have a lot of flooding areas, which are natural flooding areas, and the city occupies these flooding areas. And what kind of green infrastructure solution do you think for these flooding areas, like are going to receive 1 meter of water? Do you have some recommendation for this kind of special place? I used to say don't put green infrastructures there because it's not going to solve the question, and maybe it's going to be like seen as something which is failing, even if it's things to fail. And I don't know. Tell me
Sure.
a little bit.
Well, that's one of the great challenges of our times. And pick a place in the world, and they can probably tell you that they've never seen such extreme weather in recent years, whether it's temperature or flooding or wind or fire, right? We know that we're really facing rapidly increasing challenges with all of these features. So when you have a meter of water falling onto a city, that's a huge challenge to try to mitigate. So all of the tools need to be used, including some larger scale tools, some larger nature-based solutions. Like we can think about floodplains in the city and floodplains in neighborhoods to kind of capture that water and have part of that neighborhood that can be flooded. It's impossible to infiltrate a meter of water in one day. So it needs to be stored somewhere. And part of it are the decentralized solutions, the street trees, the green roofs, the cisterns. Those are all pieces of the solution. But for the really extreme events, if you make a decision to try to manage that, then you need to find some space that can be flooded. And what that could be, I showed the parks, floodable parks. That's one way, but there can be green networks through cities, especially cities that are growing where there's still an opportunity to set that land aside. Once you have an already built city like Sao Paulo, that's a big challenge to find the space to put the water. So that's where Pellegrino is kind of looking at the unit that he uses is the urban sub-watershed. You know, watershed is a physical concept. Where does the water go when it rains? And there's another version of that called a sewer shed, which is not only the natural shape where the water goes, but where do all the sewers go? So when you make a map of that, then you can start to do the analysis. What is the area? How much is impervious? What is the topography? What is the infiltration? And then if you make a model of that, and then you apply an extreme event, you try to design the system so that it can function in that extreme event. But for those kind of events, I think they will all rely on some extraordinary storage ideas. Maybe even parts of the city will flood, and the first floor needs to be designed in a way that the building doesn't collapse if the first floor gets flooded. You know, if you have 2 meters of water in the street, then all of the first floor of the neighborhood will be flooded. So, but if you have the mechanical systems for the building higher up, then certainly not in the basement. This is one of the lessons we learned in New York City after the hurricane about 10 years ago. You know, the subways were flooded, and the buildings were flooded, and the elevators didn't work, and the electricity was broken. And so flood proofing that basic infrastructure is important. And then, you know, it's not the best solution if the street fills with 2 meters of water for a week, but it's less of a problem if after that week, if the buildings can still function. So those are my thoughts on that question.
Thanks a lot. We are getting close from the ending. We have 4 minutes, so I believe we don't have more time to open to more questions. And I don't know, Cecilia.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jack. It was really, actually, we have more questions in the chat, some in English, some in Portuguese, but
Cecilia,
here with us. Okay. We had more than 100 people today, so it was really nice. And next week on next Wednesday, we're gonna have Nina Marie Lister from Toronto, and she's great. Also, she's wrapping up this series. We opened with Marta Fajardo, and then we are wrapping up with Nina Marie. The only 2 women out of 10. And this was my fault, or I mean, when I did the list, I was trying to check all the availability, and for coincidence, just 2 women, and then but they are opening and closing the series. And because we have lots of so many incredible people talking and working and teaching and researching and doing, and we are trying to do this since the pandemic started this virtual meetings almost weekly. And so I thank you so much, Jack, for being part of this series and instigating so much our brains and our energy to do more than what we've been doing. So thanks a lot. And
well, it's my pleasure, and you're very welcome. I'm happy to do that, and I'm very impressed with your program. Nina Marie Lister has been a hero of mine for a long time. I've invited her to my university to speak. She's a very bright woman, and she does really important work. So I'm sure she will have something very important to say for your audience. So congratulations on the series. Good luck with your work. Good luck to everybody who's here, who I can't get to see, but I'm honored that you tuned in to listen today, and I wish you all success. I did put my email on the slide. If you send me an email, I will try to respond. I can't promise if I get flooded with questions. I can't promise to do them all quickly, but I will try. So, thank you very much.
Thank
you, Jack.
Thanks a lot, Jack. We're safe to fail, all of us.
We have to be right.
Right, and take care of your beautiful country and your beautiful cities. I love Brazil. I love, I went to Portugal many times before I came to Brazil, and then to go to Brazil was like a little bit like England and the US. The former colony that is now the big brother. And it still has ties to the old culture, but it's developed a whole culture on its own. And I love the Brazilian culture, the food, the music, the dancing, the people, the landscape. It's fantastic. I really love it. So you have a lot to teach the world about how to live a good life in cities. I think Brazil is very good for that. So that's a strength you can use to promote around the world.
It's very good to have this incentive because things are really tough now in Brazil. Who is living there is having really challenging times.
Yeah, and well, we came out of the dark a little bit, a year ago. So I think things are a lot better. But
oh yeah,
we still have.
You did, because you were also very bad, a very bad situation as Brazil is now. But hopefully this will end soon. Well,
good luck with that.
Yeah, hope so. Well, thanks a lot for everybody.
Okay.
Obrigada, pessoal. Muito obrigada pela presença. E a gente já mostrou muitos casos brasileiros aqui em outras oportunidades, né? No ano passado a gente chamou muitas pessoas, muitos brasileiros. Esse ano também teve, durante essa série, teve o André Graziano de São Paulo. E eu vou agora passar a palavra para o Pierre, para ele fazer o arremate aí, tá? Então, quarta-feira, mesmo bate-hora, bate-canal, né? É o mesmo Zoom, endereço, e quem quiser o certificado precisa se inscrever, tá? Naquele link que a gente já passou, já divulgou várias vezes, lá do CCE da PUC. Então, é só entrar lá e se inscrever para poder ter o certificado. Se não, entra direto aqui no Zoom, e é o mesmo endereço de hoje, tá? E quarta-feira a gente fecha essa série. Espero que todo mundo possa estar presente. Vai ser muito bom. A Nina arrasa.
E quero agradecer principalmente também o Rodrigo, a Amanda, da CICE, da PUC-Rio, o Tomás e a Carolina também, que prestando apoio na tradução, aí uma tradução exemplar, pessoal dedicado, que permite passar esse conhecimento para mais gente. Muito obrigado a vocês aí por todo o apoio. E o Jack mostra, né, aquele rio que pega fogo. Ele mostrou isso 12 anos atrás, isso me marcou muito, essa imagem. Fiquei muito impactado com aquele rio pegando fogo, como que a água pega fogo, como que o ser humano consegue chegar a essa bizarrice de tacar fogo no rio, né? E isso lembra que a gente está aqui para reagir, né? A natureza, ela reage. E pode vir a Bolsonaro, pode vir quem for, onde vai estar aqui para receber, para transformar, para plantar, para combater, para quebrar o concreto. Então, não vamos se desanimar, que pode ver que estamos aqui animados para mudar as coisas, gente. Muito obrigado. Saint Jacks, Merci, obrigado a todos e a todas. Boa noite, bom descanso, até quarta.
Tchau, Rodrigo. Tchau, Carolina. Tchau, Tomás. Tchau, Giovana. Obrigada.